What's up, everyone? Thanks for hanging out. It's First and Pod. You know the drill. Danny Parkins, Andrew Fillipponi. Subscribe, rate, review. Give us a 5-star review. Tweet it at one of us. He's at the Pony Express. I'm at Danny Parkins. And we'll hook it up and give you some love on social media or future podcasts if you do. We're going to talk.
Please subscribe. Please. You have 2 young kids. I have a daughter that's 7 months old. Okay. This goes a long way in providing for these 3 little ones. And subscribing is the fastest way for them to, I guess, get what they want from the 2 of us. So please.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, the cost of college education is going up. And I don't know if people are aware, but the relevancy of radio is going down. So podcasting is the future. So we kind of need this thing to work. So hook us up if you don't mind. But Pony, before we get to the football, I want to tell you about something that I am doing. We're recording this on Thursday night.
I already know about it. You better work on your jump shot. You're playing basketball at the United Center. I'm so jealous that you get to do that. What are the auspices of that? Is it a pickup game? Is it a celebrity game?
Yeah.
What's
okay.
happening?
Yeah. So it's Friday night. It's something called the Bulls play the Bucks and it's a 9:00 local tip because it's the ESPN game. So we get to go into the United Center at 4 p.m. And it was through. I didn't have anything really to do with the sponsorship, but I'm just going because I'm me, and they were kind of in partnership with the company. And my nephew is a diehard Bucks fan, and so I kind of pulled some strings to get us to the game, and you get good seats with it. And he's like the biggest NBA fan and the biggest Bucks fan in the world, and so we get to play on the court before the game. But I don't know how many other people are going to be there. I just know that Chuck Swirsky, the Bulls radio voice, and Bill Wennington are the coaches. I know there's warm-ups and then a full-court basketball game. And I haven't played full-court basketball since probably 2015. And
I hope you puke. I hope that they have to clean up the court before the real game that night on account of you. And someone slips later in the game and it's your fault, like a Larry David moment.
Dude, like RIP to Richard Lewis, by the way, he was in that episode where they tripped Shaq. I'm not in good shape. I'm in golf shape. I'm not in basketball shape. I bought basketball shoes today. Like, because I didn't trust any of my shoes like to hold up. I bought the new Devin Bookers. Devin Booker. Yeah.
Wear them, return them?
I'm thinking about it.
Definitely.
I'm thinking about it. I was looking at cheap ones, and then I was like, I just don't like any of these. And then they're like, these just came in today. We haven't even put them on the shelf. I'm like, what are they? They're like, they're Devin Booker's first signature shoe, and they're tight. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll buy these. Yeah.
When I played in Cam Hayward's celebrity baseball game this past summer, I had the latest Mike Trout cleats. And they retail like $200, and everyone was dapping me up for it. But little did they know, the very next day they were going back to Dick's Sporting Goods.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, we're classy. Dude, so I will put it at, I will be sore on Saturday. That's a minimum. My back, for people on the podcast that don't know, I've had multiple spinal surgeries from scoliosis back in high school. Like, I am not a good athlete. But what are the chances that I suffer an injury because there will be pain for a week. I know that. That's a given. But what are the chances that I like pull a muscle, tear a tendon, a ligament, something that is a 2+ week injury from this game?
It depends how hard everybody goes, but I think Achilles and hamstrings are in play here.
Yeah.
And a ruptured Achilles tendon
would be devastating to my golf season.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be devastating to life in general. You'd be laid up with a boot or one of those like machines where you have to, like, it almost looks like a tricycle where you have to cart yourself around for a while because you can't put weight on it. So yeah, that would be devastating. Yeah, Danny, in a situation like this, just don't try to be Michael Jordan in this game.
Right.
You know, you don't need to prove to everybody that you're the best player on the court. It's not worth it.
That's not going to be in doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. My plan is to play 3-point line to 3-point line. Do a lot of Olay defense, go for steals, kind of, but like
try to talk him into his zone.
Yes.
Talk him into his zone.
That's a great idea.
Play a 2-3.
That's a great idea. So yeah, I will report back next week on my performance. I'm just hoping to hit a shot or two, set up my nephew with some dishes, and not be
Now, does the guy that did the pregame introductions during the Jordan era, is he going to be on the PA mic for this game? And if you knocked out a shot, is he going to be like, Danny Parkins?
No,
for 3?
unfortunately not.
Oh,
But there's gonna be some cool perks that
that
come with it.
audio would be gold.
Yes, we have him saying my name from the Scores 30th. We brought them all back and did that when the score turned 30. So I do have that audio, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I'm legit nervous about this. Legit nervous. So let's get into it. The Bears are the story of the offseason. Yet again, your team is maybe directly involved, at least tangentially involved with the number 1 pick. And the Bears, they're drafting Caleb. That's happening. That people can speculate. They're going to evaluate the character. They'll do their due diligence on Drake May and Jayden Daniels. But I am convinced they're drafting Caleb. The question is about Fields and if there actually is a market here or if they are just talking and trying to conjure something up. I had heard that people at the Combine were talking about a hypothetical or potential 51st pick plus a day 3 pick from the Steelers. And then there's talk that the Falcons would need to beat that with the 43rd pick and maybe a pick swap, because to move from 9 to 8 which is Atlanta has 8 and the Bears have 9, is roughly the equivalent on those trade value charts of a mid 4th round pick. And I think that Ryan Poles would be very interested in swapping with the Falcons from 9 to 8, because Justin Fields said it himself on the Amon-Ra St. Brown, Equanimous St. Brown podcast when asked about Atlanta, that they need another receiver. And in a ton of the mock drafts, the 3rd receiver is going off the board at 8 to the Falcons. So I definitely think there's teams that make some sense, but the easier part of this equation is Caleb and the Bears after his on-the-record comments to Pete Thamel that he'd be very excited about coming to Chicago and that he wants to measure up to legends like Michael Jordan and Walter Payton, and pandered about deep dish pizza. That part, I think, at this point is easy. The Fields part's the thing that's complicated.
So just to make sure that I hear you right, you don't think that some of the stuff we talked about a little less than a month ago with him being a DC kid and Cliff Kingsbury getting hired there, you think that ultimately is not even going to come? They're not even going to make an offer.
I do not. I listen. I think that Washington will try, and I do not think that Ryan Poles will be swayed. I think that, and listen, I think that one of the things of intrigue is like when Ryan Pace evaluated the 2017 draft, he only did full day in-person workouts and meetings with Mahomes and Trubisky, and he didn't even do it with Deshaun Watson. And that drove me crazy.
I remember talking to you about that, how mad you were about that whole situation.
Because it was like you had the 3rd pick in the draft at the time. Yes, you traded up to 2, but you got to scout all of those guys. I think that it's possible that it comes out that they don't even do the full person in-day interview with Drake May and Jayden Daniels, because on tape to Ryan Poles, it's so clear that there's a gap between Caleb and the other guys. So I think that part is basically over at this point. Do you disagree?
I really don't. You would obviously be more in tune to the situation than I am. So I'm going to put a lot of stock in what you're hearing and what you're saying about it, because it's every day of your life now. It's a 24/7, 7 days a week obsession that you have to be dialed in on for your job. I heard today that there's a lot of skepticism around the league about Atlanta's desire to get Fields.
Yeah.
In that there's a real sense that he doesn't fit what they're trying to build offensively. And Morris and Robinson don't really want that type of project as their quarterback for the offense that they want to run there. That's what I've heard. So if that's true, we know that the Raiders thing isn't happening. I'm fairly convinced right now that the Steelers would not trade the 51st pick for Fields. It's getting dark early for the Bears on the Fields front. And the Adam Schefter BS about the first round pick was complete nonsense that was fed to him probably by Ryan Poles off the record. We can now, I think, say that with a high level of confidence there. I said to you, maybe it was last week or 2 weeks ago on the podcast, that I think that Bears fans are going to be very underwhelmed with the return for Fields. And right now, I think it's moving in that direction. Danny, I think that at the moment, if they get a second round pick as the centerpiece of that package, then I will feel like they made out well. And you were thinking about the 20th pick in the draft not too long ago. That ain't happening, brother.
No, I know it isn't. I am hearing conflicting things. And I think that's because Ryan Poles is doing the politicking. You and I have talked about it. I agree with you. I think that, like, Fields is good. Fields is a starting caliber quarterback. Fields would make 20 to 25% of the teams in the league better at quarterback immediately, and he's still cheap. So there should be a market for him. But then when you actually think about who the teams are, who the coaches are, what other options they have at quarterbacks, the places that they happen to have draft picks, i.e. New England, Washington, etc., you start checking some teams off. Now, I will say New England is interesting, even though I haven't heard any official connection there, because a lot of people think that they shouldn't draft a quarterback because they don't have any of the infrastructure in place to support a quarterback, and it would just be a disastrous situation. That they should draft Marvin Harrison Jr., that they should trade down for more picks and start building up the caliber of the roster around him. If you're going to do that, then maybe you do want an upside quarterback who can play Superman a little bit. So maybe that's there. But I do think that Bears fans will be devastated if they don't get at least a second-round pick for Justin Fields. But I don't think there's a lot of teams that make sense. So I think that a lot of the buzz has been Bears generated. Like, I know that Ryan Poles talks to, I mean, he was photographed at a restaurant in Indianapolis tonight with Jay Glazer. I mean, so, he does the politicking with the national media. He's not very secretive about it.
So what do you think that Fields video was all about that went viral? Did we get to the bottom of that in Chicago?
Okay, so the claim is that it's an old video that he reposted mocking how guys get ready for kickoffs, like jumping on special teams and like getting hyped, and it was an old video. Yeah,
I don't.
There's a guy in the background saying, "Ready to go home." And he reposted it on Instagram the day before he apparently left on vacation, because the only thing he's posted since then on IG on his story is him on a boat in like a swampland somewhere. So I don't know what it was. I thought it was legit on the Falcons front. I don't know, man. I know I'm supposed to be able to tell you where he's going, but I think right now there is a game of chicken happening between Ryan Poles and the rest of the league. But I do think he's going to be traded. I'd put it at better than 50-50 that he's traded by the time we do the pod next week. For whatever he can get. I think he is going to, for the legal tampering period, when that opens, do it ahead of the league year, March 13th. I do think that he will come out of the combine knowing whatever his best offer is. And I don't think he's going to drag it out, because there's no reason to think that his offers are going to get better. They're only going to get worse as teams start, oh, I can get J.J. McCarthy. Oh, I like Bo Nix. Oh, Kirk Cousins is not going back to Minneapolis. He's in play. Like, his options are only going to get worse as more dominoes start to fall. So I think that we have resolution on this within a week.
So I've not heard this team connected to him at all. I don't even know where they stack up in the odds, but I'm just going to throw this out there because once in a while we get these stories where there's all kinds of, it's like the next big shoe to drop. We talk about it for weeks, and then something that hasn't even been discussed or broached ends up being what happens. Let me just give you a Denver idea, because even though you might want to argue Sean Payton had his best success with Drew Brees, one of the most accurate passers in NFL quarterback, and that's really one of Justin Fields' biggest issues. He's not, would you agree with that? He's just not an accurate passer of the football yet. That's like a real problem for him so far.
Yeah, he's inconsistent.
Okay.
He can make pinpoint throws, but then he'll miss the swing pass that's the snap and throw layup. Like he's inconsistent.
Yeah. But to me, Drew Brees was the Greg Maddux of NFL quarterbacks. He was going to put the ball exactly where he wanted over and over again.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that Sean Payton had an obsession with Taysom Hill, to the point where he lavished him and gifted him one of the more ridiculous contracts in NFL history, where they started paying him almost like a starting quarterback while he was still a hybrid special teams, tight end, gadget player. He was, I think, transfixed by the guy's athleticism and the possibilities there. So if he felt that way about Hill, why wouldn't he feel that way about Fields?
Well, so I think he might, and it depends on how bad the market is. They don't have a second round pick, and they don't have a lot of draft capital because of what they gave up to get Sean Payton.
Right.
I don't remember if it's 5 picks or 6 picks
and
total.
Obviously what they gave up to get Russell Wilson too. So it's doubly bad.
I think they might only have 5 picks in this draft. It's either 5 or 6, and they don't have a second rounder. So, if the price dropped to a third, could I see Denver getting involved? Yeah, maybe. But I think if the price drops to a third, there's a lot of teams. Like, would Seattle want Geno Smith insurance? Would the Giants get involved? You know what I mean? As the price drops lower and lower, I think that there are more teams that would say, well, sure, like let's get involved for a day 3 pick. But I think Ryan Poles is really trying to stare down the league, and it just takes one team to buy into the reporting and give up an asset plus something else. So I'd be a little surprised if a true dark horse team like that came into play. We have a lot more from the draft and NFL storylines, including Jayden Daniels and Pony's Pittsburgh Steelers. Back after this, First and Pod. All right, welcome back in First and Pod. As you know, subscribe, rate, and review. Caleb Williams, the Bears, Justin Fields, the biggest story of the combine. What are you making of, because it happens every year, what are you making of the latest buzz around Jayden Daniels? Today on ESPN, Dan Orlovsky said the Bears should just make the number 1 pick Jayden Daniels.
And I heard Charlie Weiss say at the combine, the old Patriots offensive coordinator and failed Notre Dame coach, that his favorite quarterback in this draft is Daniels too. And there seems to be more and more of that happening, where I thought it was going to be Drake May. Instead, it's the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU. I got to be honest with you. I think it's a really hard evaluation, because look at the wide receivers they had there. And what ended up happening, I think, and I'm guilty of this, I ended up discounting and downgrading CJ Stroud in last year's draft, because I just thought they had such an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver that it was pitch and catch for him. And like we've seen for most Ohio State quarterbacks, they have such a talent edge or advantage over who they play that it makes the quarterback's job very easy. And those guys for years would go into the NFL and fail. So Stroud turned out to be the exception to the rule. But now I'm thinking about this, Daniels really had one huge year. I thought he was okay the year before, but that's kind of in line with what Joe Burrow did at LSU.
I wanted
We
to
know
talk
that
about Burrow, yeah.
we know that the rushing component is there with this guy too. He's a dual threat quarterback. I did not watch a ton of LSU games this year. So I saw the first game against Florida State. I saw their bowl game. I saw the Alabama game. I probably saw like 4 games or 5 games. I'm a Heisman voter. I did not vote him as my Heisman pick. I had him second. But it's interesting. You're starting to get people whose opinion I trust for the most part on quarterbacks. Merrill Hodge said the same thing. He's gotten a lot of these quarterback things right. He seems to be the one guy in the media who will bash guys at the top of the board. Will not just say, I would prefer this guy. He will rip the top prospects. And his top quarterback in this draft is Jayden Daniels too. So I don't know if that makes you nervous, Danny. This is obviously such a huge pick for the Bears that there's this groundswell of Daniels support now.
It doesn't make me nervous. There is groupthink that can go on here, and that maybe that's part of what's happening with Caleb Williams. But I also think that people get bored and they didn't vote Michael Jordan for MVP every year, and LeBron doesn't win MVP every year, and Belichick doesn't win Coach of the Year every year. And around this time, when guys haven't played any more games, we start to outthink ourselves and outsmart ourselves a little bit. Like Jayden Daniels is smaller in terms of weight than Caleb. He played with way better players than Caleb. He's older than Caleb. I don't personally think that you can watch the guy's tape. You can watch the highlight reel and tell me that Jayden Daniels elevates LSU more than Caleb Williams elevated USC. There's no other top 60 pick on USC, and Jayden Daniels is going to have 2 guys on offense who will go in the top 20, depending on where you think Thomas is going to go. The guy's a burner. And Malik Neighbors might go in the top 5. Now, to your point about Burrow, he had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson, and he was still 1-1, and he deserved it. Still one of my worst bets of my life is betting that Clemson team against them in the title game. That LSU team was a bullet train. But so you can play with superstars and be a superstar, or you can play with superstars and be elevated because of them. And I think that Jayden Daniels is good and he's impressive, but I don't think he's Joe Burrow. And so I don't know how you can watch a lot of what he seems to do, which is hit Malik Neighbors on a slant and he takes it to the house, or hit Thomas, who runs a 4.3 40 and runs past everyone and averages like 20 yards a catch. I don't know how you can watch that and think that that's purely a product of the quarterback compared to some of the Houdini acts that Caleb pulls out, throwing to guys who are done playing football after this season. So I'm not saying he's not good. I'm not saying he's not impressive. I don't think that there's an argument that he's a better prospect than Caleb Williams. I don't think there's an argument.
Orlovsky here as the narrator on this point, or the messenger on this point. He's, I would think, watching the same things you are in terms of, turn a 10-yard play into a 75-yard gain.
Dude, Malik Neighbors has some plays. Like, I don't know how much you've watched him. He has some plays that are Odell Beckham, Jamar Chase, take a slant and just outrun everybody.
That's why I'm a little bit surprised that Orlovsky is one of the guys.
Me too.
That's now making this argument. The one thing I've seen from Williams, and anecdotally seeing USC, I think that at least from what I saw, there's some truth to it, was that so much of what Williams did seemed to come off schedule. Yep. It seemed to be improvisational play. And so these evaluators like the Bears have to figure out, why was that? Why is that? Why was it that way? I don't remember that always being a calling card of Oklahoma offenses when Lincoln Riley was there. It's not like all of his Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks played that way. So why is it that Caleb Williams had to be, that's where he had his greatest success?
There's a lot of film that you can find of him making good plays from the pocket. The narrative, the answer that they give is The offensive line was bad, and the defense was truly atrocious. So he was big game hunting, basically. There's definitely some, and he had a ton of fumbles. So there's some bailout hero ball stuff, but a lot of the improvisational stuff is out of necessity and out of a straight up fear of punting because his team couldn't handle it. Like if they punted, they were giving up 6. So the thought is that he will be reined in the NFL, but have it as the curveball or the slider, and it won't be the main thing like it often was at USC. That's the argument.
I still think it's really interesting that this guy who's looked at as a quarterback savant in college, Riley, and he's put guys into the pros. Not that, Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield have been great NFL quarterbacks, but it is interesting to me that he had Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams and originally thought Rattler was the better quarterback.
Yeah.
It started Rattler, and then Williams took the job at Oklahoma and ended up transferring with Riley to USC. And Rattler's in this draft, and it's like the evaluations, not to go off on too big of a tangent, but it's interesting to hear people talk about him like he has maybe, they say, the best physical tools or traits of any quarterback in the draft. Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake May included, but he's going to go in like the 3rd or 4th round. And he's going to be like the 6th or 7th quarterback drafted.
So you mentioned Drake May. I think that he's the second best quarterback in the draft. What do you think we would be talking about? And I know that this is unanswerable, but just, you know how my brain works. What do you think we would be talking about if Drake May was at LSU and Jayden Daniels was at North Carolina? Because some of the throws that Drake May makes are like the ball leaves his hand like it's a rocket launcher.
Yeah.
Yep. So if he was playing with 2 first-round pick wide receivers in the SEC, I think we'd be talking about him like it's a real debate with Caleb. Like that guy.
It kind of reminds me of Tua versus Herbert.
Right.
And I think Herbert was hurt by the guys that he had around him at Oregon. He had good offensive linemen, didn't have great weapons. And I think got punished for it. And Tua had, great players around him. And I think you're right. I agree with that. I think that May had less to work with. I think even more than the guy that won the Heisman Trophy, probably made more jaw-dropping plays than anybody in college football at the position last year, maybe even more than Williams. I thought you were going to ask me, where I thought you were going with that? I thought you were going to say, if Caleb Williams isn't in this draft and it's Drake May versus Jayden Daniels, what would the Bears do with the pick? Would they still take a quarterback? Or in that situation, would they trade out of it and go with Fields for another year?
So this will be unpopular in Chicago, but I think that they would take a quarterback.
Yep. I think so too.
Because also, just think about what we said. If we think that they're struggling to get a second-round pick for Fields, but you could trade the number 1 pick if it was Drake May or Jayden Daniels for something similar to what they got last year for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, it's just a much more valuable asset. And Ryan Poles is going to want to take his guy at some point. So I just don't think that Fields did enough. It's not fair, but I think he ran out of time to prove that he was unquestionably the guy that Ryan Poles was going to hitch his wagon to pass on any quarterback he wanted in 2 straight quarterback classes. But obviously so much of this is situation dependent, and that's why I think, and Ryan Poles made the point, and it didn't get any run that I saw nationally, but I've been making it on the pod and on the show for weeks and weeks and weeks. This isn't a normal number 1 overall pick. Like people keep talking, and I'm not talking about Caleb's talent. I'm talking about the circumstance. You're like, oh, well, he could bust. Do you know how unlikely it is that Caleb Williams busts on the Bears, he's not going to a 1 or a 2-win team. They've got a top 5 defense. They've got a number 1 wide receiver. They've got a top 10 pick at right tackle last year who was good. They've got another top 10 pick this year. They've got top 3 salary cap position. They've got extra draft picks in this draft. They have extra draft picks in next year's draft. Like, it is so unlikely that Caleb Williams straight up busts because we've never seen a number 1 pick go to this good of a situation before. We've never seen it. And I know that, like I was arguing with Cowherd about it when he was on the show. It's like, they've never had a 4,000-yard passer. It's where quarterbacks go to die. I'm like, okay, so you're talking about laundry and history. You know, like, it, unless you actually believe that the Bears uniform is cursed, this is inarguably a better situation than Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck, any guy that you would talk about as a clear-cut 1-1 has walked into. It's not close. Like, so he might not
I think the only one you can argue would be the Colts, and I know how bad they were in 2011, but
they had been a consistent team before that.
Yep. Yeah. And the bottom dropped out because they had to play Curtis Painter and guys like that.
Right.
The year Peyton hurt his neck.
Right. That's the only one that's close, but this team is so much younger than that team was. You know, like they've got guys that are, I mean, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Darnell Wright, Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson, Tremaine Edmonds. They're all in their mid-20s. They're all 25, 26, 27. They're all in their primes. So I'm not saying they're a Super Bowl team next year or anything like that, but there's no indication, there's no reason to believe he's going to bust coming into this situation. None whatsoever. All right, let's talk about your team, Pony.
Okay.
You buying what they're selling when they say they've got full faith in Kenny Pickett?
No, because then 2 seconds later, they said that their number 1 objective here, preference, is to bring back Mason Rudolph. And so if you're going to bring back Mason Rudolph, you're picking to have the second quarterback be the guy who you elected to play over Pickett in a playoff game when both guys were healthy. If you have full faith in Kenny Pickett, what you do is you go and sign a backup quarterback who's more mentor than someone who has a chance to usurp his job. If you have full faith in Kenny Pickett, you don't pray that a guy resigns with you who had wide receivers like Deontay Johnson saying after the year, I hope Mason Rudolph is our starting quarterback next year. Okay, that's not full faith. Is having Jacoby Brissett or Ryan Tannehill back up Kenny Pickett, not Rudolph. So it was their GM, Omar Khan, gave a 15-minute Q&A with local media today and left every option open. You know, he gave a quote that would make you think he was a Kenny Pickett believer. He gave a quote that would make you think he prefers Mason Rudolph to Pickett. And he gave a quote that would make you think that the Justin Fields trades is still on the table. So I don't think, you know what it tells me, Danny? I think the organization is split on this. I don't think it's a unanimous thing. I think
didn't you say that Tomlin's got more power than Khan?
He does, but I think it's a house divided. I think the owner makes the ultimate say, and he wants Kenny Pickett to be their starter, and he probably wants Mason Rudolph to be their backup. I don't think the GM would necessarily list his quarterbacks that way, and I don't think the coach would either. But ultimately, they work for the owner. So I think right now they're saying things that the owner wants them to say, but it's a head scratcher because they're known for being such a patient and stable organization. But we also have not had many scenarios or situations that mirror this, where they got poor quarterback play in the previous season, and there were guys like Justin Fields or Russell Wilson at the league minimum available in an offseason. So that's why I think the door is ajar slightly for Fields or maybe even Wilson. But if I had to bet, if I had to guess, I would think that Pickett is their number one quarterback and Rudolph is their backup when they come to camp. And you know what, Danny? At that point, they might have the worst quarterback situation in the entire league if it goes down that way. They'll be in the running for the worst situation in the entire NFL.
If they do that, what do you think the chances are that Pickett backs up that faith that Omar Khan said he has? In other words, that we play a full 2024 NFL season and going into 2025, that faith will be rewarded and he will be their starting quarterback 17 games from now. Is that a 5%er? Or
no,
is it more?
I think it's higher than that, but I don't think it's good. I don't think it's higher than 50-50. You know,
it's definitely not higher than 50-50, buddy.
Well, so if you bring in Rudolph, not that he's well liked in league circles, I don't think the guy's going to have a huge market. I don't think there's going to be many teams vying for his services to be anything more than a decently compensated paid backup. But Rudolph did enough to save their season last year off the bench when Trubisky sucked, that when they get to camp, there's going to be players who want Rudolph. There's going to be fans that want Rudolph. And I think there's going to be some coaches and some front office people. And when you already have a split, you've seen this in Chicago. When you already have a situation like that, it does not take much for the starter to lose his job and for the other guy to get a shot at it. And so Kenny would be looking over his shoulder from game one. If he had a bad game, the clock would be running for Rudolph to come in and replace him. It's just not a conducive environment for a quarterback to thrive and succeed. I think if they really are behind Pickett, which actions will speak louder than words, they won't bring Mason Rudolph back. They'll pick somebody else to be their number 2 quarterback.
It's a really sad scenario that the presence of Mason Rudolph is a distraction or dividing force for the hometown number 1 first round pick. That is just right there a huge indictment of
how
Kenny
big of an
Pickett
issue do you think it'll be in Chicago with DJ Moore and the stuff he said when they dump Fields and bring in Williams? He's just going to take it all back and say, I was just backing my guy. I didn't actually believe any of that stuff. I'm ready to rock and roll.
I think he's going to say that I believe in Justin. It's a business. And my guess is that we don't hear from DJ Moore until after he plays with Kenny Pickett or with Caleb Williams in whether it's down where Caleb's training in Florida or it's out in LA or it's at a mini camp or an OTA. And he'll come out and he'll be like, damn, guy's good. You know, like it's a business, man. DJ Moore played with Kyle Allen and Baker Mayfield and 100 other guys. And he produced with all of them. And then he produced with Justin. And then he'll produce with Caleb. There's very little doubt in my mind that Caleb Williams is a better thrower of the football than Justin Fields. So if DJ Moore can have 1,100-yard seasons with Teddy Bridgewater and Kyle Allen and Baker Mayfield and then a 1,300-yard season with Justin Fields, and Caleb's a better thrower than Justin, I think DJ is going to be just fine.
By the way, this whole Steelers quarterback thing has depressed me so much. I've actually talked myself into the Russell Wilson thing being a good idea because of the salary that comes with it and the fact that you can do it for only $1 million.
What do you think they're going to do with the 20th pick? What position would you like if you had the power rank position likelihood?
I'd say right tackle, corner.
After Broderick last year?
Well, he's going to move to left tackle.
But so tackle in back-to-back drafts?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd say right tackle, corner, center, and then maybe either defensive line or inside linebacker.
So you think you guys are in play for Powers Johnson in the first round?
I do. Okay. I do. Because they cut Mason Cole and they don't have another center on their roster right now. A guy that's been a starter at that position consistently. But the Russell Wilson thing, like, There's just so little risk involved. And I'm not going to have delusions of grandeur here and think that the guy's going to come to the Steelers and, the light bulb's going to come on and he's going to be some great quarterback. But the dude did throw more touchdown passes than Lamar Jackson last year.
Yeah.
Which is insane if you think about it. And he got benched with more touchdown passes than the guy that won the MVP award. So is he still one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the league? I would say so. And I'm not sure the Steelers have somebody on their roster that I would put in that power ranking right now.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They don't.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. All right, thanks everyone for listening. Subscribe, rate, review. Wish me well on not blowing out an Achilles.
I want video. I want highlights of that. We got to post it.
We're sending a video guy.
Good.
Dude, my back hurts right now talking about it. This is not going to be good. I'm the oldest 37-year-old you know. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks to Spencer Ray, First and Pod. Peace.